John F. Kennedy, Dallas, Texas, November 22, 1963. Hundreds of people line the street. The President of the United States sits in an open car, waving. Then two shots change everything. More than 60 years later, the full story is still not settled. The Cold War was at its most dangerous. The United States and the Soviet Union had come within days of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis just 1 year before. Kennedy was seen globally as the man who pulled the world back from the edge. His motorcade through Dealey Plaza was a public show of confidence, and it made him completely exposed. Kennedy was born into one of the most powerful families in American politics. His father, Joseph Kennedy, shaped every move his sons made in public life. JFK became the youngest man ever elected president. He was charming in front of cameras and chronically ill behind closed doors, a fact kept from the public. His back pain, Addison's disease, and the medications he took were hidden from the press throughout his presidency. His marriage to Jacqueline Bouvier was a political partnership as much as a personal one. His private life was more complicated than his public image. He had real enemies. The CIA resented his handling of the Bay of Pigs invasion. Organized crime figures had worked with his campaign and later felt betrayed. Cuban exiles blamed him for abandoning the invasion. These tensions were not theoretical. Only they were documented. Kennedy was not accused of anything. He was targeted. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested as the sole gunman, then shot dead 2 days later by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner with known ties to organized crime, in the basement of the Dallas Police Department, on live television. The Warren Commission, established by President Johnson, concluded in 1964 that Oswald acted alone. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reviewed the same evidence and concluded there was probably a conspiracy, but could not identify who else was involved. Those two findings have never been reconciled. The full CIA files on Oswald were not fully released until 2022, and even then, some remain classified. 2 shots from a 6th-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. The first struck Kennedy in the upper back, passing through his neck. The second struck his head. He slumped forward immediately. He was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where doctors worked to revive him. He was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. He never regained consciousness after the second shot. Jacqueline Kennedy refused to change her pink Chanel suit, still stained with her husband's blood, before Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One. She said she wanted the world to see what they had done. Kennedy's death did not just remove a president. It removed the political center of gravity that had held together a fragile coalition of Democrats, Northern liberals, Southern conservatives, and civil rights supporters. The Civil Rights Act he had stalled on passed under Johnson within months of his death. American trust in the federal government, which had been high throughout the post-war era, began a decline after November 1963 that has never fully reversed. The murder of Oswald on live television meant the case could never be properly tried. A dead suspect cannot be cross-examined. Evidence cannot be tested in court. That legal vacuum is where conspiracy theories live, and why they have never stopped growing. The Kennedy assassination did not just introduce the word conspiracy into everyday American speech. It made distrust of official explanations a permanent feature of American public life. History has a way of closing its files, except when a door is deliberately left open. Princess Diana. She survived a marriage that broke her publicly, a press corps that followed her everywhere, and years of personal suffering she was expected to keep quiet. Then at 36, she died in a tunnel in Paris, chaste as she had always been chaste. Paris, France. August 31st, 1997, just past midnight. Diana was in a car with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed. Their driver, Henri Paul, was attempting to evade a group of pursuing photographers. The car entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at high speed. It did not come out. Diana Frances Spencer was born into British aristocracy. Her family had deep roots in the English aristocracy going back centuries. She married Prince Charles in July 1981. An estimated 750 million people watched the wedding on television. The marriage was troubled from the start. See, Charles had not ended his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles before or after the wedding, a fact that eventually became public. Diana spoke openly about her bulimia and depression in a 1995 BBC Panorama interview, the first time a senior royal had ever discussed mental health in public with that level of honesty. The interview was watched by 23 million people in the UK alone. The palace considered it a serious breach of royal conduct. Her divorce from Charles was finalized in 1996, because she lost the title Her Royal Highness, but retained the title Princess of Wales. In the final years of her life, she campaigned publicly against landmines, a campaign that directly contributed to the 1997 Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel mines. She also continued her work on AIDS awareness at a time when the disease was still heavily stigmatized. No crime was committed against Diana in any deliberate, planned sense. Her driver, Henri Paul, one had alcohol and prescription antidepressants in his system at the time of the crash. The French inquest and the 2008 British inquest both ruled the crash an unlawful killing, caused by grossly negligent driving, with the pursuing photographers sharing responsibility. Operation Paget, Scotland Yard's investigation, examined theories involving the royal family and British intelligence services extensively. It found no evidence to support them. The Mercedes S280 struck a concrete pillar in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at high speed. Henri Paul and Dodi Fayed were killed on impact. Diana and her bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones survived the initial crash. Diana suffered a torn pulmonary vein, internal bleeding around the heart. She was extracted from the wreckage, treated at the scene, and transported to Piti-Salpêtrière Hospital. She died at 4 a.m. Rees-Jones, the only survivor, had been wearing a seatbelt. Diana's death forced a serious public conversation about the relationship between the press and public figures. The paparazzi industry did not end, but the specific behaviors that night became a reference point in every subsequent debate about press ethics in the United Kingdom and Europe. The UK Press Complaints Commission tightened guidelines. It was not enough for many. That conversation continues today. An estimated 2.5 billion people watched her funeral on September 6, 1997. When her sons William and Harry, then 15 and 12 years old, walked behind her coffin for the entire length of the procession. A decision made by the royal family that drew widespread criticism at the time and has been discussed by both princes publicly in the years since. The flowers left outside Kensington Palace formed a carpet nearly a mile long. The monarchy's public approval ratings dropped sharply in the days after her death, then recovered after Queen Elizabeth II addressed the nation. She was called the People's Princess. The title stuck because it pointed at something the palace never fully resolved. Jesus Christ Rome executed thousands of people by crucifixion. Most of them have been forgotten entirely. One has not. And the execution of a single Jewish preacher in a Roman-controlled province became the founding event of the world's largest religion, followed today by more than 2 billion people. Jerusalem, Roman-controlled Judea. Passover week, the most politically tense time of the Jewish year. The city's population swelled with pilgrims. Roman authority was concentrated and visible. Governor Pontius Pilate was in the city specifically to manage any unrest. The Jewish religious leadership, the Sanhedrin, was navigating a careful balance between their own authority and Roman control. Any figure drawing large crowds and challenging religious law was a threat to both. Jesus was a Jewish preacher from the region of Galilee. His teachings drew large crowds. He challenged both Roman authority, indirectly, and the practices of the Jewish religious establishment directly. He criticized the money changers in the temple. He ate with people considered ritually unclean. He claimed authority to interpret Jewish law above the established priests. His arrival in Jerusalem on a donkey during Passover was a deliberate act. In Jewish tradition, a donkey was the mount of a king arriving in peace, as described in the book of Zechariah. Arriving this way, in a city packed with pilgrims, surrounded by people calling him the Messiah, was not a quiet entry. The Sanhedrin recognized it. The Sanhedrin charged Jesus with blasphemy, specifically, by claiming to be the Son of God, which under Jewish law carried the death penalty. But the Sanhedrin did not have Roman authorization to carry out executions. They brought him to Pilate and reframed the charge as sedition, claiming to be king of the Jews, which was a direct political threat to Rome. The Gospel accounts say Pilate found no basis for the death penalty and offered to release Jesus under a Passover custom of releasing one prisoner. The crowd, though prompted by the chief priests according to the Gospels, asked for the release of Barabbas instead. Historians note that Pilate's actual governing record was not that of a cautious or reluctant man. Roman accounts describe him as harsh and easily provoked. The Gospel portrayal of a hesitant Pilate is considered by most secular historians to be theologically shaped, not a straightforward historical account. Crucifixion was Rome's standard execution for slaves, rebels, and enemies of the state. It was designed to be slow, public, and degrading. Jesus was flogged before being led to the site of execution at Golgotha, outside the city walls. He was nailed through the wrists and feet to a wooden cross. The exact configuration is still debated by scholars, but wrists are now considered more anatomically accurate than palms for supporting body weight. Death by crucifixion came through a combination of blood loss, shock, and asphyxiation. As the body's weight made breathing progressively harder, it could take days. Jesus died within hours, which the Gospel of Mark records as surprising to Pilate. Roman soldiers confirmed death by thrusting a spear into his side. His body was placed in a tomb belonging to Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin. The cross, a Roman instrument of state humiliation, became the most recognized symbol in human history. Christianity spread across the Roman Empire within 3 centuries and became its official religion under Emperor Constantine in 380 AD. The theological meaning given to this execution, that it was a voluntary sacrifice for human sin, is the central claim of Christian doctrine. Every denomination of Christianity, across every continent, builds its theology from this one event. The resurrection claim, that Jesus rose from the dead on the 3rd day, is not a historical claim that can be verified through standard historical methods. It is a theological claim. What historians can document is that within weeks of the crucifixion, a community of followers was publicly declaring the resurrection in the same city where the execution took place, and that the movement grew rapidly despite active persecution. Rome built its empire with crosses, and one of those crosses built a religion that outlasted Rome entirely. Abraham Lincoln. The Civil War had just ended. 5 days after General Lee's surrender at Appomattox, the president who had held the country together for 4 years went to the theater. He never came home. Washington, D.C., April 14, 1865. Ford's Theater. The Union had won. The city was celebrating. Lincoln's security detail that night was reduced to 1 officer. A Washington Metropolitan Police officer named John Frederick Parker, who left his post outside the theater box at some point during the performance. The exact timeline of Parker's absence is disputed. The result was not. Lincoln was born in a 1-room log cabin in Kentucky in 1809. He educated himself largely through borrowed books. He practiced law without a formal degree. He lost elections before he won them. By the time he reached the presidency in 1861, he was leading a country that was already breaking apart. He was despised in the South and distrusted by members of his own party in the North. Radical Republicans thought he moved too slowly on emancipation. Conservatives thought he moved too fast. His plan for Reconstruction after the war, based on reconciliation rather than punishment, had not yet been implemented. He was the only person in American politics at that moment with the authority and the political will to carry it through. John Wilkes Booth was a well-known actor and a committed Confederate sympathizer. He had performed at Ford's Theater before and knew the building. His original plan was to kidnap Lincoln and exchange him for Confederate prisoners of war. When Lee surrendered, Booth shifted to assassination. He coordinated simultaneous attacks. He would kill Lincoln, and an associate named Lewis Powell would kill Secretary of State William Seward, and another would kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. Seward was stabbed and seriously wounded. The attack on Johnson did not happen. Booth's shot found its mark. Booth entered the presidential box from behind and fired a single .44 caliber Philadelphia Derringer bullet into the back of Lincoln's left ear at close range. Lincoln slumped forward in his chair. He was carried across 10th Street to a boarding house, the Peterson House, because the theater owner feared he would not survive the carriage ride to a hospital. He was laid diagonally across a bed too short for his 6'4" frame. 9 doctors attended him through the night. He never regained consciousness. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, he was pronounced dead. Lincoln's death removed the one political figure who had the standing to impose a fair Reconstruction on the South. Andrew Johnson, who replaced him, had neither the political capital nor the commitment to protect the rights of freed Black Americans. The Reconstruction that followed was bitter, contested, and ultimately incomplete. The racial inequality that Lincoln's war had begun to dismantle was systematically rebuilt in the decades that followed. His absence was not a footnote. It reshaped the next 100 years of American history. Lincoln's body was carried on a funeral train that traveled 1,654 miles through 7 states over 13 days. Crowds gathered at every stop, in cities and small towns, in open fields in the dark. He became the first sitting American president to be assassinated. In the decades since, he has become the standard by which American presidents are measured. His face is on the penny and the $5 bill. His memorial in Washington sits at the western end of the National Mall, out of facing the Capitol. What Lincoln might have done had he lived is one of the most debated questions in American history. The country he left behind answered it differently than he would have. Julius Caesar Rome, 44 BC. 60 senators walk into a meeting with knives hidden under their togas. Their target has been warned. He goes anyway. What happens next does not save the Republic. It destroys it. The Roman Republic had been fracturing for decades before Caesar. The gap between the wealthy and the poor had grown to breaking point. The Senate was dominated by a small number of elite families who treated political power as personal property. Military commanders had learned that loyal armies could override the law. Caesar was not the first man to exploit the system. He was just the most successful. By 44 BC, Caesar had been named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. It was not a temporary office granted in a crisis. It was permanent. For the senators who still believed in the Republic, or who feared losing their own power, this was the line. Caesar was born into the patrician class, but spent his political career aligning with the common people, the populares, against the aristocratic faction known as the Optimates. He was a military commander of extraordinary ability. His conquest of Gaul between 58 and 50 BC extended Roman territory to the Rhine in the English Channel. He crossed the Rubicon River in 49 BC with his army, an act that Roman law explicitly prohibited because it brought a military force into Italian civilian territory. It was an act of war against the Senate. He won. His alliance with Cleopatra was both a romantic relationship and a strategic one. Egypt was the wealthiest kingdom in the Mediterranean world. His popularity with Roman soldiers and the Roman public was enormous. That popularity made him untouchable to normal political opposition. It also made him dangerous to men who feared what came next. There was no formal charge, no trial. The men who killed Caesar, a group of senators who called themselves the Liberatores, justified the act as tyrannicide, the killing of a tyrant to protect the Republic. Their leader was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar had trusted and reportedly favored. Gaius Cassius Longinus organized the conspiracy. Whether Caesar intended to formally declare himself king is debated by historians. Whether the evidence that he was accumulating power beyond any Republican precedent is not debated. At the Lupercalia festival shortly before his death, Mark Antony publicly offered him a crown 3 times. Caesar refused each time. Whether that refusal was genuine or staged for the crowd, no one alive could say for certain. The Senate was meeting that day in the Theater of Pompey, not the Senate House, which was under reconstruction. Caesar arrived without his usual bodyguard. The conspirators surrounded him under the pretense of presenting a petition. The first strike came from Servilius Casca, who stabbed him near the throat. Caesar grabbed Casca's arm. Then the others moved in. According to the physician Antistius, Caesar was stabbed 23 times. Only one wound was immediately fatal, a thrust between the first and second ribs that pierced his aorta. He fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, his former ally and later enemy, whom he had defeated in civil war. Ancient sources, including Suetonius, record that when Caesar saw Brutus among the attackers, he stopped resisting. Whether he spoke his last words to Brutus, and what those words were, is disputed. Suetonius says he may have said in Greek, "You too, child." Other sources record nothing. The conspirators expected the Senate to cheer and the people to rally to the Republic. Neither happened. The Roman public turned against the assassins. A Mark Antony read Caesar's will publicly. It left money and land to the Roman people. Within days, Brutus and Cassius had fled Rome. The power vacuum Caesar left behind was filled not by a restored republic, but by a series of civil wars that ended with the rise of Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, as the first Roman emperor. The conspirators killed Caesar to prevent a monarchy. They created one. The word Caesar stopped being a name and became a title. Roman emperors used it, or it passed through Latin into German as Kaiser and into Russian as Tsar. Both titles were still in use in the 20th century. His calendar reform, the Julian calendar, governed the Western world's timekeeping for over 1,500 years. The Gregorian calendar we use today is a direct revision of his. The Ides of March, March 15th, entered language as a permanent warning about the cost of power. His assassins believed removing one man would restore a system. What they actually did was prove that the system was already gone. Martin Luther King Jr., Memphis, Tennessee. April 4th, 1968. King was standing on the second-floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel. He was not there for a major march. He was supporting striking sanitation workers, Black city employees fighting for fair pay and basic dignity. By 1968, King had moved beyond civil rights law, when he was openly opposing the Vietnam War and organizing a poor people's campaign targeting economic inequality. That shift had earned him powerful new enemies, inside government, inside the military, and inside the FBI. King was born in Atlanta, Georgia, to a Baptist minister father. He earned a doctorate in theology from Boston University at 26. He led the Montgomery bus boycott, the Birmingham campaign, and the 1963 March on Washington. His strategy was nonviolent direct action, disciplined, public, and documented. The FBI, under Director J. Edgar Hoover, ran a covert program against him called COINTELPRO. Declassified files confirm the FBI sent King an anonymous letter, encouraging him to take his own life. King was never charged with any crime. James Earl Ray, a fugitive with a history of petty crime, fired one shot from a bathroom window of Bessie Brewer's rooming house across from the motel. King's family later stated in civil court proceedings that they believed Ray did not act alone. A 1999 civil trial jury found in their favor. No criminal court has confirmed a wider conspiracy. One rifle shot. The bullet struck King in the right side of his jaw and traveled down through his neck, severing his spinal cord. He was transported to St. Joseph's Hospital. Doctors worked for over an hour. He was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. He was 39 years old. King's death triggered riots in more than 100 American cities within 24 hours. The most widespread civil unrest in the United States since the Civil War. The Fair Housing Act, which had been blocked in Congress for 2 years, passed 6 days later. His death moved legislation that his life had not been able to move on its own. The FBI's surveillance files on King, including the letter urging suicide, were declassified and published. They became one of the most documented cases of a government systematically targeting a private citizen through its own intelligence apparatus. King's birthday became a federal holiday in 1986. The full FBI files on his assassination remain partially sealed until 2027. A government spent years trying to silence one man. His words are now carved in stone on the National Mall. Osama bin Laden. For nearly 10 years, The most wanted man on Earth had no confirmed location. And then a CIA analyst noticed a pattern. Not a phone call, not a satellite image. A courier. One careful man making careful trips to a large walled compound in a quiet Pakistani city. Abbottabad, Pakistan, May 2nd, 2011. The compound sat less than a mile from Pakistan's top military academy. It had no internet connection and no phone lines. The walls were 18 feet high. Residents burned their own trash rather than put it out for collection. And the CIA had been watching it for months before concluding with sufficient confidence that bin Laden was inside. Bin Laden was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the 17th of more than 50 children of a wealthy construction businessman. He studied economics and business administration in Jeddah. During the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, he helped fund and recruit foreign fighters, work that had U.S. backing at the time. He founded al-Qaeda in the late 1980s. By 1996, he had issued a formal declaration of war against the United States. He directed the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, the 2000 USS Cole attack, and the September 11, 2001 attacks, the deadliest terrorist attack in history, which killed 2,977 people. Bin Laden claimed direct responsibility for the September 11th attacks in a video statement released in 2004. The U.S. government had indicted him for the 1998 embassy bombings years before. No trial was ever held. The U.S. government authorized a capture or kill mission. The operational objective, according to declassified briefings, was not a courtroom. U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 flew into Pakistani airspace without notifying the Pakistani government. The operation, called Neptune Spear, lasted approximately 40 minutes. Bin Laden was found on the third floor of the compound. He was shot twice, once in the chest, once above the left eye. He was identified through DNA comparison within hours. His body was washed, wrapped in a white sheet, and buried at sea from the USS Carl Vinson within 24 hours. In accordance with Islamic tradition, and to prevent any grave from becoming a gathering point. His death did not end al-Qaeda. It was a symbolic close to one chapter of the post-9/11 era. Within 3 years, ISIS had emerged from al-Qaeda's Iraqi branch as a larger and more territorially aggressive organization. The global jihadist movement that bin Laden helped build did not depend on one man to continue. Pakistan's failure to detect bin Laden living openly in Abbottabad for years, near its own military facilities, became a major crisis in U.S.-Pakistan relations. Pakistani officials denied knowledge. The U.S. government declined to say publicly whether it believed them. That ambiguity has never been officially resolved. The compound was demolished by Pakistani authorities in 2012. The most dangerous man of his era was not found in a cave. He was found in a suburb. Saddam Hussein. He had ruled Iraq with absolute power for 24 years. He had survived assassination attempts, wars, and international sanctions. When U.S. forces finally found him in December 2003, he was alone in a hole in the ground, 8 feet deep, barely wide enough to lie down in, on a farm near his hometown of Tikrit, Baghdad, Iraq, December 30th, 2006, 3 years after the U.S.-led invasion. And the country was fractured along sectarian lines. A Shia-led Iraqi government had taken power. Saddam had been tried by the Iraqi Special Tribunal, convicted, and sentenced to death. The execution was scheduled for before dawn, during the Islamic holy day of Eid al-Adha. Saddam was born in poverty near Tikrit in 1937. His father died before he was born. He joined the Ba'ath Party as a young man and rose through its ranks using political intelligence and a precise willingness to use violence against rivals. He took full control of Iraq in 1979, the same year he had potential challengers executed in front of their remaining party leadership. His rule produced the Iran-Iraq War, lasting 8 years and killing hundreds of thousands on both sides, the use of chemical weapons against Kurdish civilians at Halabja in 1988, killing an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 people in a single attack, the invasion of Kuwait in 1990, and the systematic suppression of Shia and Kurdish uprisings after the Gulf War. Saddam was charged specifically with the 1982 massacre of 148 Shia civilians in the town of Dujail, following a failed assassination attempt against him. He denied the charges throughout the trial and maintained that he remained the legitimate president of Iraq. Amri's separate trial for the Anfal genocide, in which Kurdish populations in northern Iraq were subjected to a systematic campaign of killing and displacement in 1986 to 1989, was still ongoing at the time of his execution. Saddam was hanged at dawn in a former military intelligence facility in the Kadamiyya neighborhood of Baghdad. The execution was attended by Iraqi government officials and guards. Someone in the room filmed the proceedings on a mobile phone. In the footage, what guards taunted Saddam with chants referencing the Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr as the noose was placed around his neck. The footage was leaked within hours and broadcast globally. Saddam's response to the taunts, captured on camera, was recorded. He was not visibly distressed. The leaked video was condemned by Sunni Arab governments across the region. They called the timing, the morning of Eid al-Adha, a deliberate sectarian act. The footage deepened existing divisions between Iraq's Shia and Sunni communities. Al-Qaeda in Iraq used the execution and its circumstances as a recruitment tool. That organization later became ISIS. Saddam's execution did not stabilize Iraq. The power structures he had built, held together by fear, patronage, and tribal loyalties, collapsed with him, leaving nothing functional in their place. In the de-Baathification policy that removed his party members from government, also removed most of the country's experienced administrators and military officers. Some of those officers later formed the military backbone of ISIS. He was pulled from a hole in the ground. What came after him was harder to bury. Mahatma Gandhi. He built a movement without an army. He drove out one of history's most powerful empires without firing a single shot. Then 5 months after India won independence, a fellow Hindu walked up to him at a prayer meeting and shot him 3 times. New Delhi, India, January 30th, 1948. Gandhi was walking through the garden of Birla House to an evening prayer meeting. India had been independent since August 15, 1947. But independence had come with partition, the division of British India into India and Pakistan. And partition had produced one of the largest forced migrations in human history. A night with estimates ranging from 10 to 20 million people displaced and hundreds of thousands killed in communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. Gandhi was born in Porbandar, Gujarat, in 1869, into a merchant caste family. He trained as a lawyer in London. He spent 21 years in South Africa, where he developed the philosophy of nonviolent resistance he called satyagraha, meaning truth force. He returned to India in 1915 and led campaigns that included the 1920 non-cooperation movement and the 1930 Salt March, a 240-mile walk to the sea to protest the British salt tax. His methods produced real legislative and political results. He opposed the partition of India but accepted it as unavoidable. His insistence that India pay Pakistan its agreed share of pre-partition financial assets during a period of open hostility between the two new countries made him a target among Hindu nationalist groups who believed he was prioritizing Muslim interests over Hindu ones. Nathuram Godse was a member of a Hindu nationalist organization and a former member of the RSS. He believed Gandhi's approach to partition had weakened India and given too much ground to Muslim political interests. He had been involved in a previous failed assassination attempt on Gandhi on January 20th, 1948, 10 days before the killing. Gandhi was not given additional security after that attempt. Godse approached Gandhi in the garden of Birla House during the evening prayer gathering. He bowed, then fired 3 shots at close range into Gandhi's chest and abdomen. Gandhi died within minutes. Witnesses recorded his last words as "Hey Ram," meaning, "Oh God." Godse made no attempt to flee, for he was arrested immediately. Gandhi's death produced an immediate and powerful political effect. The RSS was temporarily banned. Jawaharlal Nehru addressed the nation on All India Radio that night, with words that became among the most quoted in modern political history: "The light has gone out of our lives." International reaction was immediate. Albert Einstein, who had corresponded with Gandhi, said generations to come would struggle to believe such a man had walked the earth. Rigaud's was tried, convicted, and hanged in November 1949. He never expressed regret. His written statement from trial, in which he explained his reasoning, was banned in India for decades. The ban was lifted in 1997. Gandhi's assassination deepened the debate within India about the relationship between religious identity and national identity, a debate that remains unresolved and politically active today. He was killed for choosing peace in a country that was tearing itself apart. Whether that choice was wisdom or miscalculation depends on who in India you ask and when.